Good afternoon. My name is Joe Bandel. I am the last Rosicrucian. Today's video, we're going to talk about the fourth turning and a reality check. I think it's about time we kind of checked in, and how would I say, I'm just gonna say where I'm coming from, what my understandings are, what I buy, or what I believe, for what it's worth. And for those of you who are more familiar with my own belief or my own personal spiritual path, I call it Oak or organic Gnosticism. And it's pretty much based on Dewey Larson's reciprocal systems theory that was once taught in at least one university. I forget when, but since then, a lot of people don't buy it. But what I really admire about it and why I'm influenced by Dewey Larson's reciprocal systems theory, try speaking that, say that fast 3 times, uh, is that it lends itself to interdisciplinary uh, concepts. It it kind of ties a lot of things together in a pretty nice way. For example, it talks about uh, the universe is actually being two reciprocal systems that are connected by the speed of light. Uh, one of uh, one of them is the space-time universe. One of them is the time-space universe, which is an inverse or a reciprocal of the other. And that there's a constant flow of energy that flows between them, a perpetual circuit that flows between them. And the space time universe is 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, the way we think of it. And the time space universe would be 3 dimensions of time and 1 dimension of space, the way we think of it. And now, I tend to think of it as well. It's basically saying is there's an astral world, or there are astral worlds, and there's the physical reality. So anyway, that's an example of how it kind of lends itself toward uh, multidiscipline approaches. And one of the things that the implication of that is that even as in the physical material world or the space-time world, material objects gravitate toward each other, in the time space universe, or what I would consider like the astral worlds, the non physical realms, events gravitate together. And so, to me, in my personal experience, that seems to be fairly obvious that events gravitate together to create important periods of time where lots of things happen all at once. Because I don't know about your experience of life itself, but it's not a little bit happens, a little bit happens, a little bit happens, a little bit happens. In my experience, it's more like nothing really important happens for a long time, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm saying I believe that that's a reality of the nature of the universe. That all that as events gravitate together, just what's going to happen is important periods of time. And we're in one of those. We're in one of those big time. This is one of those where all hell's breaking loose. A lot of things are happening and they're just beginning to happen. Uh, we're just seeing the very beginnings of some massive, massive change that's coming down. This is my belief. Which leads me to this book called The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. It was published in 1979, I believe it was. I just looked it up. And what's interesting about this book, let me say it's a national bestseller, a startling vision of what the cycles of history predict for the future. And what the whole premise of this book is that history repeats itself. But more importantly, society or civilization evolves. And it evolves in a very specific way through what is called four turnings, basically, of 20 to 25 years apiece. So the completion of the cycle is somewhere between 80 years and 100 years for this cycle to complete, and then it's going to start happening all over again. And what, as applied to American history, what happens is there was a cycle at the American Revolution, and roughly 100 years later, between 80 and 100 years later, you had the Civil War. And the next cycle comes around and you had World War II. And now what's happening is coming around is another revolutionary cycle, basically, of what's happening. And so this book is talking about how society and civilization evolves. And I'm kind of paraphrasing my own understanding of it. You're free if you're really interested. It's a fascinating book. But what it talks about is there's a golden age in which all the brilliant people offer advances to civilization that really propel civilization forward in a quantum leap. And then those inventors, those leaders or whatever, it'll reach a point where they're blocked. And what happens is the last of the years of the cycle is for the laggers, the slow people, to catch up. So the end of the cycles where the collective, the common person, whatever the stragglers, they got to catch up. And they're never going to catch up completely, but they got to catch up. And then what happens, and I'm gonna say it again, there's a social contract. And this book talks about the social contract. The social contract is an agreement where the individual citizens of a country, in this case the United States, they have a path, a collective agreement, a social contract that works for, let's say, 90% of the population. It offers the American dream for, let's say, 90% of the population. You're always going to have a certain segment of the population that's kind of left out. That's just kind of the way it is. But if it works for 90%, then the world's not perfect. So that's a good thing. That's what you shoot for. And what happens is you have this golden age, and in our framework that we're talking about, we'll say the golden age came after World War II, after the war was over. The Americans came back home victorious, and there's a leap in technology, and the baby boomers were the generation that really benefited. They benefited big time from this cycle. And every generation, 20 years, every generation since the baby boomers were born, I'm a baby boomer, but every generation after us had it a little harder and a little harder and a little harder till today, where the upcoming generation, the generation that's just joining the workforce, is having an almost impossible task. There's so many living with, unable to make it, so they're still living with their parents, and it becomes kind of a joke. Or it takes, in a marriage, both marriage partners have to have full-time jobs to make ends meet. And I guess what I'm saying is the social contract as it exists today is broken. There's too many people that it doesn't work for anymore. Forget about what people are saying. It's just too hard. It's not working. And what's happening is the people that it's not working for are complaining, and they're striking back. They're voting back. And what's happened is the need for a new social contract. And the point of this book is saying that this is natural, this is what happens. You have the golden age, and you go through, and then things get worse and worse and worse and worse until there's a rebellion where people say it's not working. It's screwed up. The system is rigged. And it reaches a crisis that could be civil war, oftentimes is civil war, or a war of some kind. And then a new social contract is put into place. Now, what makes this interesting, even more interesting, is today, or right now, this time period, is 2025. And it's the first year of the second Trump administration. But this book, The Fourth Turning, it says that the last part of the book is talking about the fourth turning. And what it's saying is there's going to be a need for a new social contract. And that's if the cycle holds true to all the past cycles, the cycles following the Revolutionary War, following the Civil War, following World War II. If what happens now follows true to that cycle, the new social contract should be put in place around 2025. Well, guess what? This is 2025. The Trump administration just came in and is currently mopping the floor, cleaning out the swamp, so to speak. Now, there's a lot of people against that, or they're feeling against that. But if you take this book, The Fourth Turning, and you understand this system of cycles, I find it very interesting that the synchronicities that are happening here, because if there's a new social contract that's going to be put into place, where is it? There is only one social. There's only one happening. That's the Trump agenda. That's a promise of a new social contract, and it's really dug its heels in. It's really rocking the boat. It's really cleaning house. One where whether you're in favor of it or you're not in favor of it, it's doing some things, and it has the backing of the general population. So it's the other thing, another interesting tidbit that comes out in this book is that the opposition, whatever it is that's opposing the new social contract, is pretty much going to be wiped out for, I think it said, 40 years. In other words, it's going to, that counter movement's going to pretty much be eradicated. So just a heads up, people, if everything is following the cycle that we're talking about here in the fourth turning, we are seeing lasting change that's going to last over the end of my lifetime. I don't know how many years I have left, but it's happening and it's being implemented right now. The other thing that this book talked about that is interesting is they're saying that the new social contract is going to be designed or figured out. The people who have the answers are going to be the millennials. In other words, a younger generation. And when you look at Trump's cabinet, what you're seeing that's remarkable is the amount of younger people that are involved in it. And they're the ones that are going to be finding the solutions. Trump's not finding the solutions. It's going to be his cabinet leaders that are going to be acting independently to solve their own individual tasks, if you will. And Trump may have the big picture, but the nitty-gritty details are not going to be coming from Trump. They're going to be coming from the experts that he finds that's working with him. So these are some thoughts that I don't think they're debatable. I think that this fourth turning book, there are cycles of how humanity, how civilization evolves. And what we're seeing happen now in this burst of technology and how it's being used, for example, how to find the fraud, the waste, the extra spending, where the money goes. They're using high technology to find things that have been hidden forever. And just through the idea of the waste and the fraud, following the money, all of a sudden we're finding out where it's been simply by the use of technology. Another interesting thing they talk about is, I forget what term they used, but it was something like the gray man or something like that. Uh, Somebody from the baby boomer generation, or the baby boomer generation itself, was going to be inspiring the millennials into the new social contract. And I spend a lot of times when looking at YouTube or whatever, and I find these reaction videos where there's a lot of younger people that are discovering the music of the 60s and 70s for the first time, and they're really digging it. In other words, they're being the spirit of the 60s and 70s is the spirit of the baby boomers. And there's a lot of people that are being inspired by that music. They're being inspired by the hippie movement, the love type of thing, make love, not war. And that's influencing a lot of the younger people. Now, when you combine this, I look at the science of there's Valentine's barking. Uh, Dewey Larson is saying how events gravitate toward each other, and we have this critical time period where it seems like everything's converging to a crisis point, to a crescendo. And you have another group of people who I follow, and I actually repost things from, I guess you'd call the star seeds, who are really spiritually oriented. They're really today's version of the hippies, I guess what I'm saying. Extraterrestrial types, star seed types, things like that. Uh, there's a big movement that we need love, we need compassion, we need uh, to treat each other on the human level. So that's kicking in at the same time. It's kicking in with, I think, the spirit of the hippie movement that way. We'll see how far it goes, but I find it very very unique. And how does all this square with the Trump administration and what's going on? I think that there's a certain group of people that are really fear based, and they're really trying to uh, get people fearful and anxious and riled up so that they act out, but it's not going to work. And this is my personal feeling. I'm putting it in this reality check or whatever. I say there's going to be a lot of people who are alarmed at what's happening and what the Trump administration might do. But I believe that next year at this time, a lot of those fears are going to be allayed. People are going to realize, oh, this is not as bad as I thought it was. Uh, as they begin to see the benefits, because in my opinion, what's happened, what is going to be happening, what is happening, really is a lot of common sense, uh, middle of the road, common sense things to really get things back in balance after being totally whacked out of balance. And it's what we're going to see is a return to heart-based thinking, heart-based living, where we actually think of people as humans again. And this power grab for land, this power grab for power, for war, that kind of stuff, we're going to see it end. I'm hoping that, and that's leading us into a golden age instead of having perpetual war because of the neocons keep continuously stirring things up there. I'm just saying that I think that in a year's time, a lot of the people who are fearful now are not going to be fearful anymore. They're going to be changing their opinion. And in the meantime, of course, you have the large majority of people who are very excited and happy about what's happening now because there's finally change coming after years and years of empty promises where nothing's ever been done. So what I've tried to share here is that I've tried to say don't be afraid, and there's nothing that can stop this change that's coming because there's so many factors that are being triggered. It's a convergence of many things. I haven't even gotten into astrology, or you could come up with all kinds of other factors where it's kind of like where everything all of a sudden there's so many factors and they're just feeding into each other. They're intertwined with each other, uh, and they're all taking the same opportunity to happen now. And we are. It's been coming. It's been coming. It's been coming. It's hit the physical. There's jobs that are being lost. Don't show up to work till next week. This kind of stuff. In other words, it's no longer theory. It's hitting the streets. And that too is freaking a lot of people out. And I think it's worth mentioning that when you talk about metaphysics, you talk about the astral planes. The astral planes do not like to change. So what happens is they will resist change. If you try to power through and make something happen, it won't change. It'll absorb your energy and divert it to a harmless way until it gets over 125%. At 125%, it will snap and it will form into a new pathway that's in accordance to the increased energy. The same thing happens the other way. It will resist. If you're trying to keep afloat, you're trying to keep afloat, it will try to keep you afloat until you get below 75%, and at that point something snaps and you're just cut off. So there's that shock absorber thing here, and that is why the Trump administration is being so severe at this point. It's it's got to be severe to reach that 125%, or it can snap the resistance, cut the resistance so that things change permanently. Once they've changed permanently, they will attempt to maintain that new position. that's just the way I'm seeing things right now, and I know people are having some trouble with that, so I thought I would share that for this week. Till next week, thank you. Goodbye.